Welcome. It is Verdict with Ted Cruz Weekend Review. Ben Ferguson with you. And here are some of the big stories that you may have missed that we talked about this past week. First up, Donald Trump's message to the world on the peace agreement. What was behind it? How did it get done? And how big could this be for peace in the Middle East? We break it down for you. Also, Charlie Kirk's widow receives the Medal of Freedom Award for her husband. This was a touching moment at the White House, and Senator Cruz was there for it. And finally, Eric Trump joins us, the president's son, to talk about how much it costs the Trump family to fight all of the legal warfare. It's the Weekend Review, and it starts right now. So many people that are listening to Verdict, they're going to get to not only, I think, hear from probably leadership in Israel in the next several hours. It's certainly going to happen in the morning or midday. You're also going to be able to hear from the President of the United States of America. What do you expect his message to be? And this is, by the way, all happening right now while the federal government is still shut down in the U.S. And I want to get your take on that in a moment. But what do you expect to hear from the president today?
Look, I think the president is going to say this is an historic day. This peace agreement is a moment of history that ended a war that is extended for 2 years, that freed people who have been in captivity for 2 years, subject to horrific treatment. And I think he's going to say, I expect the parties to stick to the terms of the agreement. I think he is going to continue with peace through strength. He's going to continue with the opposite of weakness and appeasement, because we don't get to this peace agreement without President Trump's strength. And then this is one thing to remember. There are some observers who want to say that Donald Trump is an isolationist. He has never been an isolationist.
Yeah,
he is. Look, the first term that Trump was in office, when he came into office, he inherited an ISIS caliphate that had grown under Barack Obama. That was the size of the state of Indiana. They had an entire nation state to wage terror against America, and Donald Trump utterly decimated and destroyed it. Within months, the caliphate was gone. He completely defeated them. He also took out General Soleimani. He took out al-Baghdadi. Those are not the actions of an isolationist. You look at the second term, where he's been bombing the living daylights out of the Houthis, who are attacking ships going through the Suez Canal. He is bombing the heck out of narco-terrorists off the coast of Venezuela. And by the way, Machado was smart to say he deserved it because, look, her efforts fighting Maduro are very important and they're courageous. But President Trump's strength is the single factor that makes it most likely that the Maduro regime will be toppled. And so President Trump taking out those narco-terrorists is another example of peace through strength. And finally, the Iran bombing run, taking out their nuclear facilities. None of those are the acts of an isolationist. Now, to be clear, President Trump is also not an interventionist. He's not invading foreign countries. I don't expect to see the Marines engaged in invading other countries other than to protect the vital security interest of America, to keep America safe. The only instance in which we would see a ground war is where there was a direct danger to the lives of Americans. And in those instances, President Trump is willing to use military force, but he's not engaged in this broader endeavor to send in our military to try to turn every country in the world into some utopian democracy. That's not the job of the military. Donald Trump doesn't think it's the job of the military. And the result, strength is the best way to avoid war.
Yeah.
Our enemies are afraid of Donald Trump. That is a very good thing. Hamas is afraid of Donald Trump. Hezbollah is afraid of Donald Trump. Iran is afraid of Donald Trump. Maduro is afraid of Donald Trump. China and Russia are afraid of Donald Trump. All of that is good because America is safer, and we are more likely to avoid military conflict when our enemies are afraid of the commander-in-chief than when our enemies, you look at Joe Biden, when they look and say the commander-in-chief is weak and completely incapacitated. And that is why we went from no wars across the globe to 2 wars, Ukraine and Gaza, both raging under Joe Biden. That's what happens when you have a weak and appeasing president.
An update for everyone on the government shutdown here in the U.S. We are into 2 weeks now of this government shutdown. We are starting to see it affect people's lives. We're seeing healthcare issues with those, for example, in San Antonio. I was there today talking about there's a lot of people there that are saying that the providers are not able to get the money and the funding they need. Doctors are frustrated. The Schumer shutdown is really starting to hurt people in our military, their kids, those with special needs as well. Your reaction, how much longer this is going to continue, and do you see any movement this week?
Well, we're right now in day 12 of the Schumer shutdown, and the government is shut down because over and over and over again, the Democrats are voting to shut the government down. And I will say, it's actually interesting. Today on Twitter, 53 Republicans was trending. And the reason it was trending was an exchange, a back and forth that I had with Gavin Newsom on the shutdown. So Gavin Newsom tweeted out, "Wow, that is wild. I wonder who has control of the White House, Senate, and the House." And this is one of the Democrat talking points as well. This is the Republicans' fault because the president and the Senate and the House are all in Republican control. Here's what I responded on X. I said, Gavin is deliberately lying. To fund the government takes 60 votes in the Senate. There are only 53 Republicans. We need at least 7 Democrats. We keep voting to open the government. Dems keep voting to shut it down. Gavin Newsom knows this, and he's lying to you. And as of right now, that's had 1.7 million views. It was trending on Twitter. And it's the simple fact. We cannot pass funding for the government without 60 votes in the Senate. That means there is nothing Republicans can do to fund this on our own. Yeah. The Democrats all know this. We have voted, I think, 8 times now. The Republicans have voted to open the government, to fund the government, and every Democrat, but I think 3, have voted no, and that's why we have a shutdown. Now, we're all expected to go back to D.C. on Tuesday of this week, and we'll vote again to fund the government. I've voted to fund the government now over and over and over again. I'll vote again on Tuesday to fund the government. And I think it is very likely right now the Democrats will continue the Schumer shutdown.
Wow.
And I'll tell you what I think is one of the major reasons is coming up on October 17th, there is this big rally in D.C., the No Kings rally, where a bunch of the left-wing radicals are coming to D.C. And what most of my colleagues believe is the Democrat senators are terrified of opening the government before that rally because they don't want their crazy base, the same base that almost cost Schumer his job last time. Yeah. They don't want their crazy base to get angry. And so I think most of us...
So you're telling me, the American people right now, that there's a very good chance that the government shutdown will continue because of a rally date.
Yep.
And that date again is what?
October 17th.
Okay, so the 13th, 14th, 15th. Okay, so we got another 5-6 days of this just to get to the rally, and then maybe we'll actually do their job and fund the government.
Look, at some point they're going to do their job and fund the government, but wow. A bunch of federal employees are about to miss their first paycheck. I'll tell you, ordinarily soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines would lose their first paycheck as well. The Trump Department of War has said they're going to move some funds around and pay our servicemen and women, and Democrats are furious. How dare you find a way? Look, I don't know if they can do it because it is not easy with the funding paused, but the Democrats don't care. And I'll tell you, one of the great acts of hypocrisy is the Democrat congressmen are all paying themselves, or most of them. I don't know about all, but so under the 28th Amendment to the Constitution, the compensation of a member of Congress cannot be reduced during your term of office, which means during a shutdown, House members and senators get paid no matter what. Even though everyone else, their paychecks stop, elected members of Congress get their paycheck. Now, you can say no. So I sent a letter to the Secretary of the Senate saying, please hold my paycheck. Yeah. Do not pay me. I do not want that money deposited in my account until the government shutdown ends, until our service members are being paid. I'm not going to pay myself. But you look at these Democrats who are happily shutting the government down. They're also taking their own paycheck and saying, gosh, I like being paid. And, they are not troubled at all if some young corporal serving overseas suddenly doesn't get his paycheck and can't pay his bills this week.
Now, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation, you can go back and listen to the full podcast from earlier this week. Now on to story number 2. Speaking of the White House, as you just mentioned, you were there with many cabinet members that were in attendance for a really, I think, special moment. You and I had the honor and the privilege to go to the memorial service for Charlie Kirk. What we witnessed today was something incredible. Donald Trump awarded Charlie Kirk the Medal of Freedom on what would have been his 32nd birthday at the White House. And his wife, his widow, Erica, was there to accept this. It was a moving moment, and you were there for all of it.
So it was truly a beautiful day. It was a beautiful fall day in October in Washington, D.C. The sun was out. We were in the Rose Garden, and in the Rose Garden you had a lot of members of Congress. You had virtually the entire cabinet came out for it, and Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow, was there. The president really, I think, did a very good job remembering Charlie, speaking from the heart, honoring Charlie's legacy, and presenting him with the highest civilian honor we have in this country. And in the military context, the Medal of Honor is the highest recipient that can be awarded an individual. In the civilian context, the Medal of Freedom is the highest honor that can be awarded an individual. And to give it to Charlie, it was bittersweet because Charlie would have been 32. He was a young man. He had an incredibly bright future. As you and I have talked about, we both have known Charlie a long time. I considered Charlie a very close friend. Heidi and I met Charlie when he was just 18 years old, when he was a kid. At the ceremony at the White House, I met Charlie's parents. I had not met his parents before, and I had an opportunity to just tell both his mom and dad, say, look, Heidi and I, we love Charlie, and when we got to know him 14 years ago, his vision then was as clear as it was the day he died. His vision of creating a movement to energize, to mobilize young people, to love freedom, to love free enterprise, to love the Constitution, to love America. That vision, you could see it. When I met him, he was this tall, lanky 18-year-old kid. He was fresh out of high school, had not gone to college. And you got to remember the context. This is 2012, beginning of 2013. Barack Obama had just been reelected. The Democrats were resurgent. At that point, young people being a Democrat, an Obama Democrat, was hip and cool. The idea of energizing a lot of young people to be conservatives, frankly, sounded loony. It did not sound like an easy task at all. A lot of people in the Republican Party said this will never work. But Charlie had a vision, and I was telling his mom and dad, I said, look, his vision was extraordinary. One of the things I said to them is I said, look, we are grieving the loss of your son. He was extraordinary. I'm so sorry. So sorry for your loss. But I said, you know what? I think in the last month, it may well be possible that more people have heard the gospel than in any comparable period of our lifetimes. That memorial service in Arizona for Charlie was a global event where people heard the gospel. And I got to say, at Charlie's funeral service, when Erica stood up and she talked about how when Jesus was hanging on the cross and he was looking down at the Roman soldiers who had nailed him to the cross, who were in the process of killing him, and Jesus said from the cross, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And she talked about how Charlie really had a mission for young people, particularly young men who are often disaffected, disillusioned, to help them find their way and find a purpose in life, a meaningful purpose that provides real satisfaction and real reason for living, and she talked about that young man who shot Charlie, that young man. And then she said, and I got to say, as she was doing this wind-up, I knew you knew where she was going. And I got to tell you, you and I were standing next to each other. I literally held my breath. I'm like, is she going to be able to say this? And she stood up with the eyes of the world upon him and said, that young man, the young man who pulled the trigger and murdered her husband, murdered the father of her children, she said, I forgive him. I don't know that there was a dry eye in the house. And one of the things that is so incredible is millions of people were watching that. And listen, if you're a Christian, you understand, just like Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, even as they were killing him. But if you're not a Christian, I believe thousands, if not millions of people looked at each other and said, how can she say that? Where does that come from? Where does that forgiveness come from? Where does that love come from? And I think it was as powerful a testament of the gospel as we have seen in a long, long time. And I got to say, today, the president spoke beautifully. And by the way, when Erica said, I forgive him, Ben, I hope and pray you or I are never in that situation. I don't know that those words could come out of my mouth. I would want them to. I would desperately want them to, but the strength it took for her to say those words, I find utterly astonishing. And I told Charlie's parents, I said, listen, I so wish Charlie were with us today. But millions have heard the gospel in the last several weeks because of Charlie, and that is one hell of a legacy.
You know, I think one of the most incredible things that you just mentioned is the legacy. And one of the things that the president said today at the White House, for people that didn't hear it, was talking about Charlie Kirk being a martyr. And this is what the president said about that.
He said on the day that he was assassinated, Charlie Kirk was a martyr for truth and for freedom. And from Socrates to think, and to St. Peter, from Abraham Lincoln to Martin Luther King, those who change history the most, and he really did, have always risked their lives for causes they were put on earth to defend. He was put on earth to do exactly what he was doing. He didn't want to waste time. He would have been a top student at any college in the country. I know the college as well. He's smarter than the guys there. He was so smart. But he almost, I guess, didn't have the time. He knew what he wanted to do. It wasn't like, gee, I want to sit in the classroom for 4 years listening to people teach me liberal principles, because they were never going to teach him that anyway. But he didn't have the time. He really didn't have the time. But every time the enemies of goodness and virtue tried to silence the voice of righteous and noble leaders like Charlie, they failed. They seem to fail. Ultimately, they look like they're doing well, and then they end up failing, because the truth has been unrelenting over the years, over history. And people like Charlie, it's just they've got a power that others don't have, and very few people will ever have. So today, like those martyrs before him, Charlie's voice, his message, and his legacy are stronger and greater than ever before. They are greater than ever before.
You know, him saying, as I said on the day he was assassinated, Charlie Kirk was a martyr for truth and for freedom.
Yep. And
I couldn't agree more. To compare him as he did to St. Peter, to Abraham Lincoln, to Martin Luther King Jr., these are people that change history. Charlie will be remembered in the same breath with those types of leaders. And I think that's part of the legacy. And as you mentioned, not only did Charlie and his legacy now, it is 100% setting, I think, young men and young women on fire to be bolder in their faith, to be better Christians, and to seek the truth of the Bible and the gospel. And just what he was able to do in his death is phenomenal. but also what he was doing to fight for this country at the same time. That is going to be a legacy that's going to live on because there's so many people that are going to do it for Charlie. I think you and I would include ourselves in that as well.
Well, listen, he was he was a martyr for freedom and a martyr for truth. I also told Charlie's parents, I think more people heard Charlie's words in the last 4 weeks than heard them in the entire 31, nearly 32 years of his life. That the number of people who went and said, who was this Charlie Kirk guy? What did he have to say? Who listened to exchanges as he was on college campuses, as he was engaging with people who disagreed with him, as he treated them with respect, with dignity. That is a powerful legacy. I will tell you one of the things that was also striking about the Medal of Freedom ceremony is it was a continuation of a conversation that happened at Charlie's funeral ceremony. So at the funeral, Erica Kirk spoke, and I mentioned how she said that she forgives the murderer who murdered her husband. And she talks about how Jesus teaches us to love our enemies. And Trump spoke at the funeral, and he gave, I think, very strong remarks. But one of the things he said that's something he had a great deal of difficulty doing, that he did not love his enemies, that he hated his enemies, and he liked to fight his enemies. And he kind of laughed about it, but he said that. And that was a back and forth from Arizona. Well, in the Rose Garden, Trump brought it up again. And look, President Trump knew Charlie very well, and he said, I know Erica talked about how he loved his enemies, but he said, when I talked to Charlie, he said, I'm not sure I saw that. I think he, like when he was in a battle, he would fight his enemies and fight them vigorously. And listen, Charlie was a strong man and a passionate man who knew what he believed. But it was very interesting. Erica spoke after the president in the Rose Garden. And she gave beautiful remarks, but one of the things she said that I think was directly responding to the president, she said, look, I can tell you from having been married to him, Charlie prayed for his enemies. And she said, I saw that. She said, I don't know that anyone else saw that, but she said, I saw him and he prayed for his enemies. And President Trump was standing behind her right shoulder, and she said it was lighthearted, but she was in many ways responding to the president. He laughed. He was good-natured, but he was genuinely laughing. And it was I think it was a good back and forth that we should be vigorous in what we believe. We should not give in to those who argue for positions that are harmful to America. We should be full-throated in our argument. But I also think that the message that Erica was carrying forward about it's possible to disagree, and look, you go watch the exchanges Charlie had on college campus after college campus when you would have someone come in and argue for open borders, when you would have someone come in and argue for socialism, when you'd have someone come in and argue for transgenderism, when you'd have someone come in and argue for Hamas terrorists. Charlie was vigorous and full-throated in disputing them, but he was not mean-spirited about it. He was not, I hate you. He was not, you're the enemy. But he would engage in a way that said, look, I understand why you're saying that. Here's why I believe you're mistaken. And I think Erica was right that he was able to do so from a position of love. Love does not mean agreement. Love does not mean saying, I accept the position you're advocating even though I believe it is harmful to our country. But love means not treating your political adversary as the enemy to be destroyed, but instead trying to respond with reason, with compassion, trying to move, and even if you don't move your immediate interlocutor, those who are observing it. Charlie was very good at responding in a way that persuaded a lot of other people. And I thought that back and forth Tuesday between the president and Erica was really powerful.
As before, if you want to hear the rest of this conversation on this topic, you can go back and download the podcast from earlier this week to hear the entire thing. I want to get back to the big story, number 3 of the week you may have missed. All right, so our guest with us is Eric Trump, Senator. You and I were just talking with him about this, really, his family being under siege. You talked about these big boy subpoenas part of that is to financially hurt you.
Of course.
What did you guys spend just doing the fighting of all the lawsuits against you during that 4-year period? How much did it cost you?
Roughly $400 million. You know, wow. guys, I laugh when people go, oh, Trump is profiting off of government. I go, wait, excuse me. If you want to come in, I'll break down the finances. You want to Trump's profiting? We spent $400 million to defend ourselves against nonsense. The fact that we did not have secret servers communicating with the Kremlin, the fact that Don wasn't a Russian agent. Remember, you had Adam Schiff out there every single day.
Yeah.
Donald Trump Jr. is a Russian agent. Guys, if he wasn't protected by the speech and debate clause, you would have, honestly, the guy would have been worth zero. He would have been living in a shoebox based on the fact that you would have sued him for slander and taken everything that he ever had. It was all made up lies. They did everything they possibly could to take us down. We spent over $400 million between that, Letitia, Alvin Bragg, Cy Vance, Fannie. I mean, I could go on and on. The raids, the Mar-a-Lago.
Who was the worst to deal with between Alvin Bragg, Cy Vance, Letitia James, Jack Smith? Who was the worst?
Probably Letitia, if you want to know the truth. I mean, it was
Why?
so corrupt. And I don't know, Alvin Bragg, because you had Mershon. I mean, Judge Mershon's daughter is like the head digital fundraiser for the Democratic Party, and the guy wouldn't recuse himself. And literally, you'd be sitting in these courtrooms, guys, and I would not leave my father's side. I sat next to him every single day. If he was there, I was going to be there as a son to support him. And most of the time, some of these cases I wasn't gagged in. So normally I was the guy in the courthouse steps, shouting and yelling at the cameras as to what the hell was actually going on, because that's the only way you could communicate a message. But guys, I mean, you had liberal, and I mean liberal reporters who were in that courtroom shaking their heads saying, none of this makes any sense. I mean, they shut down all of Manhattan, lower Manhattan, for a $100,000 payment that my father didn't even make, made by a lawyer. They indicted him 34 times. I mean, Al Capone had one felony indictment. They indicted my father 34 times for a $100,000 payment. By the way, by a district attorney who ran on the premise of reducing just decriminalizing just about anything. You can shoot somebody in the face in Times Square and it was decriminalized and you're going to let them out and, you're going to have community policing and all sorts of nonsense. I mean, he ran on the premise of literally emptying Rikers Island so you had no criminals in there, yet, 34 felonies in a 6-month period of time is shutting down New York and the FDR Drive every day over $100,000. I mean, it wasn't believable.
If only your father were mugging people in Times Square, then Alvin Bragg would never have prosecuted him. But instead, he committed the unspeakable sin of not only being president of the United States, but being an extraordinarily successful and bold president of the United States, which is an unpardonable sin. All right, we don't have much time left, but I want to take it a little bit lighter, and ask, what was it like? Like, your father is unique. I've never in my life have I met anyone remotely like your father. He and I have spent a lot of time together. He has extraordinary courage. But before he was president, what was it like growing up as a kid with Donald Trump as your father? What was he like as a dad when you were 10?
Honestly, the greatest dad you could ever imagine. Expected big things from us, right? I mean, every day I'd go give him a kiss before I went to school. Honey, no drinking, no drugs, no smoking. You better get good grades. And by the way, never trust anybody, right? He'd once in a while add that in. Never trust anyone. Hey, this probably
knew how important that was going to be. Now,
yeah, as I said, it probably benefited us pretty well. So, amazing guy. Listen, we were spoiled as hell in that we lived in Trump Tower. We had a beautiful roof over our head. We were always well fed. We had the best education. But we were never handed money. We were never handed cash. If we wanted something, if I wanted a fishing rod, congratulations, you're working for it. I got on our construction sites when I was 11 years old, doing demo, doing electrical, HVAC, running backhoes, excavators. I grew up working with my hands on our construction sites with many of the guys that work for me today. And you know what? He wanted us to learn a trait. He wanted us to learn the value of a dollar. And by the way, he wanted us to be tired as hell at the end of the day. Because listen, don't give type A kids, or any kid, but don't give type A kids money or free time because bad things happen. And
Amen.
He was an amazing father. He is an amazing father. And everything we've ever done, we fought together, whether it's real estate, whether it was The Apprentice. I was on that for 7 seasons. And then in politics, I mean, when he decided to run, he said to us, he goes, kids, let's do this. I was on Megyn Kelly. I didn't know what the hell immigration was. I mean, Senator, this was not my world. I built hotels, and all of a sudden now I'm in a middle box.
Build a wall, and now you're on TV.
I've got 9 illegal immigrants around me, and I'm battling all of them, and I don't know the first damn thing about illegal immigration, right? I mean, like, this is not the world that we came from. But my father's a remarkable guy. My mother was an amazing powerhouse and strict, demanded manners, demanded respect, demanded work ethic, and I have the greatest parents you can ever imagine. I spent a lot of time in Under Siege talking about, being raised by them, and, it was unique in so many ways, but they did everything they could in this strange world that we lived in to ground us and make sure we turned out to be hard workers, normal, and didn't have any of these kind of Hunter Biden-esque problems. I don't have a laptop from hell. I don't do finger painting, selling it to, foreign nationals all over the world. I never married my brother's ex-wife, like never did that kind of stuff. No drugs, no perversion. I was always a good kid who believed in God and believed in hard work and, lived an honest life.
Eric, I can't tell you how many times, dozens if not hundreds of times, people have commented that one of the things they admire most about your dad is you and your brothers and sisters. And listen, it is hard for any successful person to raise good kids. It's challenging. There's a lot of pressure, and I know your entire family, and I will say, literally, people early on throughout the process, they'll comment, well, somehow his kids are like not messed up and incredibly successful and put together, and I mean it's. All right, let me ask you. Let's say we have some young parents that are listening to this podcast. Yeah. Are there any lessons? A young parent, by the way, Ben has young kids. I have teenage kids. Are there any lessons from your dad that young parents should know, or lessons that you've tried to apply?
Yeah, keep them poor and make them start working early. Honestly, I mean that's what it is. Keep them poor. Don't give Type A kids money, and don't give them endless time. That's just a bad recipe, right? And I can't tell you guys how many friends I had, who were peers who went to school with me, and 3/4 of them ended up in rehab, and a lot of them went down bad roads. And guess what? They were getting Ferraris, when they're 16 years old. Like what do you ever want to aspire to get if that's how you're being raised? I mean, does it surprise you that those people don't have work ethic? Does it surprise you that they go down bad roads? And my father would never let that happen to us. And, he made us work our butts off. And believe me, if I wasn't good at what I did, real estate-wise, I would not be in this chair. I mean, forget about nepotism for a second. If we weren't incredibly capable, believe me, I wouldn't be running one of the largest real estate empires anywhere in the world. And he made us work, and he made us prove that we were good at what we do, and we fought every single day. And we're an incredibly tight family, and he's a remarkable person. He's my best friend. I love him to death. And I'm so proud of him, especially in a week where he's accomplished as much as he had. I am so damn proud of what he did and what he's accomplished, and the hell of a journey. Guys, it's all worth it.
As always, thank you for listening to Verdict with Senator Ted Cruz. Ben Ferguson with you. Don't forget to download my podcast, and you can listen to my podcast every other day you're not listening to Verdict, or each day when you listen to Verdict afterwards. I'd love to have you as a listener to, again, the Ben Ferguson podcast, and we will see you back here on Monday morning.